Over the past few months, we've been exploring every gig in Cyberpunk 2077, looking at their various outcomes, hidden plot threads, and various other interconnected tie-ins that they have across the world. Today, it's time to uncover the largest set of gigs in a single video, with all 13 from the Santo Domingo district, most of which are issued by Muammar El Capitan Reyes, and a couple by Rogue. There's a whole lot of cool stuff to uncover here, so without further ado, let's dive right into it. First up, Serious Side Effects is a gig which feels very similar to a major plot thread of Breaking Bad Season 5. See, Denver Doug is a Ripperdoc, one we seemingly never get to meet, and he recently had a bottle of beta acid stolen by a member of 6th Street. Now, guys down on the street can use this stuff to cook up all kinds of harmful substances, so in order to get his precious acid back, Denver employed some help. Though it wasn't us, not at first. Instead, he got a guy named Booker Updike to first try and hunt down the location of this acid. Problem is, Updike went dark right around the time he checked into the Dewdrop Hotel, and hasn't been heard from since. So, picked merely as a sloppy seconds this time around, our job is to infiltrate this motel, find the beta acid, and now also see if we can learn more about Updike's fate. Heading on in here then, we're greeted by a receptionist with clearly no idea what she's doing.
Was supposed to meet someone here. Name's Booker Updike.
Okay.
Well, is he here?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just filling in for my Choom BFF. She's under the knife today.
So, renting a cheap room in this cheap establishment, let's head further inside to explore what's going on in our and everyone else's rooms. First up, just behind reception, is a room with a 6th Street gang member, and taking him out quietly will mean we can read a terminal shedding a little more light as to what's going on here. Looks as though this motel is being rented not just as a place to stay, but also as a place to turn the beta acid into illegal substances. Just like a late plotline of Breaking Bad where they cook meth in random homes under the guise of pest extermination. However, in the case of the motel, they're fully in on it, and are straight up receiving a 5% commission. A further email tells us this is taking place in room 203 upstairs. We'll make our way there after checking out some of the other rooms. Looks like this operation hasn't entirely gone unnoticed though, with guests complaining of junkies outside constantly like we're at Saul Goodman's practice, whilst the internal corridors are filled with throat-scratching, eye-burning fumes. Fumes which ultimately spelt the end of Booker Updike, who was staying in room 103 just below the beta acid lab. Now, we can, with 12 technical ability, simply let ourselves in here, but the much more interesting and enjoyable way to do this is to ask the nearby vending machine repairman.
Yeah, see, think you misheard me. Wasn't a question. Wasn't a request.
But...
Hey, look at me. Right in the eyes. Choose your next words carefully, Choomba. Might be the last choice you ever make.
Okay. Okay, come with me. But please, keep it down.
Heading inside, looks like Updike's been dead for a while. Kind of unlucky, I guess, that he happened to pick the room which doubled as their fumigation chamber, or maybe he was given that one deliberately. Anyway, there's a really cool interaction with Johnny here, exploring an aspect of the relic which isn't touched on that much.
Smell that, right? The ventilation.
Vapors from the room upstairs.
Wait, is that... Ah, neoamphetamine.
Mean to tell me you can pin the exact drug from just a whiff? Like a police dog or what?
I'd say more like a sommelier.
Of course, Johnny has access to all of our senses, and it's pretty cool to have a guy inside your head who can smell and detect things that you can't. Now, the game uses Johnny a lot for bonus info, of course, like in the Psychofan gig, but this sense memory thing, it's another really cool expansion of this whole idea. So, let's head to room 203 in a second, but first, I'd recommend opening up every other openable room along the way, as each one has a unique encounter. In room 105, we've got two dudes recreating some of the scenes from Wolf of Wall Street, kind of. In room 200, we've got a guy making the most of the $3,500 price tag on his new headset, and in 206 is a man in a gimp suit being recorded for some reason. In 208, we have some escort women, but my personal favourite has got to be room 202, though you'll need a full 20 body to get in, or with gorilla arms, at least 14. Inside is, well...
For your own safety, please maintain silence.
So obviously the robot doing the sexy dance is a funny enough encounter in and of itself. And I mean, Atomic Heart women? Just watch out. But also, actually, the one sitting down is drinking a beer, which, I mean, makes no sense at all if you think about how they don't have a digestive tract. Plus, if we scan these two, it looks like they've even got names. This is strikingly similar, actually, to the two robots playing cards, which we can find during the flight of the Cheetah gig at Northside Sunset Motel. They too were sealed behind a 20-body door. And whilst this could just be a cool Easter egg from the devs that few will see, the fact that it's happened twice now warrants some further investigation, which I've noted down for a future video on unsolved mysteries. Finally, we come to room 203, and now this one also has a pretty hefty body requirement to break straight through the door. Luckily, somebody left the balcony door open, and low body builds can use that instead. Inside is one member of 6th Street, as well as 2 drug manufacturers, working in a pair, just like Walt and Jesse. We simply need the beta acid, but if you want to topple one of NC's many drug operations, you can take these guys out as well. Though of course, just taking out the guys at the lab isn't gonna topple the whole thing. And not too far away is a suspected organized crime activity with Darius Miles, seemingly the leader of this operation. His lots are the ones who acquire all the equipment and ship it to the Dewdrop Inn, and taking him down won't only pad out this subplot, but you'll also get the crafting spec for the Comrade's Hammer, the single most powerful gun in the game, prior to Phantom Liberty, though I don't imagine it would be beaten. Finally, back to the lab though, we can learn that these guys were indeed aware that Booker Updike was tailing them, so no doubt his death was more than just mere bad luck. Deposit the beta acid nearby, and Muammar Reyes will thank you both for its recovery and for solving the mystery of Updike. Overall, very nice gig, more fleshed out than many others I feel. A couple nice interactions, and it's clear the devs had fun populating these extra rooms. So for this, I'm gonna place it in the A tier. Race to the Top is a theft gig down in southern Arroyo, and be warned, the facility we have to break into for this one is pretty heavily armed. You see, Kendachi is an arms manufacturing corporation with one of their factories based in this district, and it seems even the lower rungs of the corporate ladder are still rife with backstabbing and conspiracies to sabotage. The client in question for this gig is running up against one Mateus Stove to become director of some new departments, but rather than leaving it up to CV and performance comparisons, this client wants to circumvent all that by digging up dirt on Mateus. And it just so happens that said dirt involves some under-the-counter agreements which Mateus has going with the Valentinos. Our job is to infiltrate this heavily armed facility and steal concrete evidence of this dirty plot. Now, if you're a netrunner, then your best bet may be to stay outside and just hack the cameras of this place, of which there are many. But since I recently crafted the Yinglong SMG, I'm going to take this opportunity to rain down some electrical hellfire. That done, we can learn a few more things. It's clear Mateus has been utilizing his most trusted workers on the factory floor to facilitate the transportation of some goods from this factory to the Valentinos, and it appears he's redesigned the night shifts to allow his nefarious deeds to go more unnoticed. There's also an assault in progress over here where we come across Alma Maria, a Valentino who Mateus was in direct contact with. Here, we can find an email straight up confirming the weapons he'll be selling to her, and no doubt this is likely what we pull from his computer during the gig. On Alma's body is a convo highlighting how Mateus was beginning to catch on to the fact that people were realizing what he's up to. These crates, in fact, are the location of his private weapon stash, which he'd instructed the Valentinos to start moving should he get caught. In fact, back at the factory is a shard entitled Mateus and Bro, where Mateus says this is the first and last time he does this. So either this shard is old and Mateus got a taste for doing biz with the Tinos, or this literally is the first time he's done a deal with them, and now it's going to cost him his life. Yes, it does lead to that extreme. His body is discoverable after the gig down in the Grand Imperial Mall of Pacifica. The final act of his life was to try and get a face change from a Ripper and start anew. But because of us, he was blocked from his accounts and couldn't afford the very steep 300k. Interestingly, it appears Stove was taken out by the Valentinos here, not the corporation he worked for, which is more what I'd have expected. Still, I suppose getting found out must have have caused complications for the Tinos, for which they figured taking Mateus's life was adequate punishment. And although we merely served as a cog in the machine which brought this to pass, it is technically due to our actions here that the guy is dead. What I like about this one is the larger than usual facility that we have to infiltrate. It keeps up more of a challenge, particularly into the later game, and as usual, connections found out in the wider world are always nice. Although it's not as good as plenty of other gigs, I'd say on the whole, I'm going to award it a B+. A more simple gig next, but one which ties in with one of the best side quests in the game. Turns out 6th Street are very big fans of Jefferson Perales. No surprise there, I guess he does have that classic American heroes stare majestically into the distance whilst a flag blows in the wind behind him style vibe, and as such, 6th Street have set up some servers designed to pump some propaganda out across the net in an attempt to help the guy win the election. Only in classic 6th Street fashion, it's not a Perales promotion campaign they're running, but rather just a smear campaign on Weldon Holt, the current acting mayor and Jefferson's opponent. Presumably, Holt, or one of his associates, wants the propaganda machine gone, and just like everyone sensible in this city, they've gone to a fixer to arrange it. Now, what I find a little strange about this one is that there's no option to complete it in an alternative way to the set objective. I mean, V became pretty chummy with the Peraleses, so it feels a little weird now that we're happily opting to damage his campaign, even despite knowing he is technically controlled by some Illuminati-esque organization. I wish perhaps that instead of disabling it, there could have been a way to just make this a pro-Perales campaign instead of anti-Holt. Still, we infiltrate this area, which I quite like the layout of, by the way. The various alleys provide for some cool stealth opportunities, and on this terminal at the other end of the quest objective are some interesting tidbits of info. Turns out the tech they're using to blast out this smear campaign is military-level Militech equipment. So powerful that they're actually in need of more generators to keep it all running. Also though is an email with an insight on this world which I'd never considered before. It comes from a Perales supporter who poses the question about what Jefferson plans to do with the illegal brain dances which are making their ways into schools. Part of it reads, quote, "Our children are being exposed to all sorts of disgusting and evil material at an age that is formative and critical to their personal growth into decent citizens. Now, I've done my homework and I know the research has proven the addictive nature of BDs. In adolescence sometimes it takes just one brain dance to get them hooked. As a community, we need to act now. We need a mayor who will think of the children before they grow up and fill this city with a mass of neurotic, lust-driven, hyper-violent animals." End quote. Now, at first I thought to myself, oh god, these awful brain dances are getting seen by children. That is dreadful. And I do kind of stand by that sentiment. Though I actually realised the way this is written might be a play on the way parents in present day complain about their children playing violent video games and such, i.e. taking something which can be problematic in extreme cases and blowing the seriousness of it way out of proportion. That said, the brain dances made by the likes of Gottfried and Frederick Persson are no doubt way worse than video games, especially considering how they're made. And I'd say on balance, this Kristen Lynch, the woman who sent the email, makes an important point. Just a shame it's not really going to matter what Jefferson makes of the issue, it's just going to be about what Mr. Blue Eyes thinks. Now, something else I found, which I presume relates to this gig, is an assault in progress a little to the south, involving a reporter named Julia Bonet and a guy named Ivan Vasiliev. Ivan, it seems, is in charge of Rancho Coronado's workers' union, and is strongly supporting Perales on the basis that Holt offers no support for the families of workers who operate under dangerous conditions. He believes Perales is the candidate who isn't in the pockets of the corpos. Jefferson himself also believes that. But it's not true. But based on the fact that this message was sent to almost 50,000 users, I'm willing to bet that it's the one being pumped out on those servers. And Holt's people see Vasiliev to be a real problem. So they employ Julia Bonet to make the guy disappear under the guise of inviting him to be interviewed. She asks this deleted recipient, who may be Holt himself, whether the people above him have okayed this, all but confirming that Holt is indeed likely controlled by a corporation. But which one? And could this connect to the murder of Lucius Rhine too? Well, that will have to be explored further in another video, because we're getting off topic from the gig now. So back to that, come up to the server we're supposed to sabotage and hack in, then that's done. Holt is no longer being smeared, at least by this set of servers, and since this one involves politics, Johnny of course has something to say.
We nail one asshole to the wall and another rises up in the polls. Politics is fucking usual.
Sorry, Johnny, but I don't have time for your little anarchist revolution.
Yeah? Well, it'd be easier than slicing heads off a fucking Hydra. One more reason this city could use another nuke.
Look, I agree with Johnny sometimes, hell, maybe a lot of the time, though I gotta say, this is obviously one of the more asshole moments on his part. I get that the anarchist way is to sow mass chaos and disruption, but dude, dropping nukes in places with thousands of innocent people in the blast, that's a pretty psychopathic way to achieve your aims. Anyway, this gig's got some cool details, and I get that it's just merc work and why therefore V doesn't really care about slightly harming Jefferson's campaign, though overall I'd still probably just name this one a C+ tier gig. Now, this next one I like, because it's one of the few to actually take place up in a mega building. And whilst granted, it's still mostly just one apartment we have to fight our way through, it's nonetheless a cool place to head up into, which I wish could have been utilised in a few more of these gigs. Hacking the Hacker is a gig commissioned by Reyes himself, who wants to maintain the balance of power in Santo Domingo before 6th Street figure out a way to tip it. See, recently, they raided a Militech transport to acquire all kinds of high-tech equipment. Drones, turrets, you name it. And with the help of a talented hacker named Lucius Thorin, they intend to jailbreak these weapons and use them to their own ends. Reyes thinks this is a gonk idea, so wants us to upload a virus to their system, and to further mitigate more gonk ideas cropping up in the future, neutralize Thorin as well. Now, that second part's an optional objective, meaning we don't have to do it, but unlike regular assassination gigs, there's no option to place him in a fixer's car instead. We literally have to murder the guy, to death. So, coming to the apartment, way up in the mega building, the place is heavily guarded by 6th Street, much like most of these gigs, and we can make our way in here in several ways. The most systematic one, involving fighting through the entire apartment, is obviously the front door, but if you simply want access to the terminal quickly, there's several ways in from above too. And if we go this way, we can learn a bit about the previous residents here. It seems that they did simply just flee when 6th Street initiated a shootout outside, before moving in themselves. Ironic that the self-proclaimed protectors of the people are forcing the people to leave their homes and most of their worldly possessions. Now, inside the hideout, we can learn a few more things. It seems 6th Street acquired these goods with some unknown assistants who fed them info on things like when the convoy was leaving the factory. Presumably it was someone inside Midlatech, and to be fair, individual lower down corpos taking bribes from gangs is a pretty common occurrence, as we saw from the Race to the Top gig. The reason Lucius wants these drones in particular then is that they seem to be some kind of open source edition, with which he can get into the source code and subsequently hack every drone of the same type across the city. That's why Reyes is so adamant we stop him before that happens. With that kind of power, 6th Street would genuinely be able to wage full-on war against the other gangs and even Corps. Also, we've got a funny email from All Foods here claiming they will no longer deliver to this address due to the heightened gang activity, and they say at the end, quote, "In the future, please consider changing your place of residence," end quote. Just imagine if you tried to order Domino's or Deliveroo or something from outside their delivery zone and they just got back to you saying to change where you live. It's kind of funny. Anyway, now just upload the virus, which is done fairly easily, after which it's purely a question as to what we do with Thorin. And here's where I discovered something interesting. See, being up in a mega building, a somewhat sadistic thought popped into my head as to how we get rid of him. So imagine my surprise when the optional objective was still there after dropping Lucius over this ledge. He can apparently survive that, though he can't quite survive this. I do feel a little bad for the dude, but at the end of the day, if he can almost raise an army of drones now, it's only a matter of time before he does so again and succeeds. On the whole, love the fact that it's in a mega building. The infiltration itself is pretty run-of-the-mill, but even despite that, there's something about being up in a place like this which just hits different. And for that, I name Hacking the Hacker an A-. Family Matters is a gig which temporarily transforms Cyberpunk from action sci-fi RPG into straight-up horror. We start off standing outside a detached house on some Rancho Coronado suburb, at which point Reyes phones and explains the deal. One of his top netrunners, Juliet Horrigan, recently collected some Zetatech data for Reyes, but after claiming she's been having family issues, has since disappeared for the last 2 weeks, leaving Reyes without his data and Juliet seemingly unreachable. So, tired of waiting, Reyes has finally employed persuade us to head to Juliet's house, recover the data, and if possible, find out what the issue is. Heading into the house then, you'll either need 12 tech, 12 body, or the ability to jump to the roof and head in through the window. And now this one, you can tell, already sits just a cut above many of the rest of the gigs. The whole investigative nature coupled with Johnny's commentary on things makes this feel almost more like an investigative Witcher contract. And indeed, this one does have an emotional and complex monster story behind it. The shards and clues here paint a pretty clear picture of what happened, so let's go through. It all started when Juliet's sister Rose contacted her out of the blue, claiming she'd lost her job, and alluding to the fact that she's starting to hear echoes, voices inside her head, just like when her and Juliet were kids and would shout from atop the dam down into the valley. So, noticing that her sister clearly isn't doing the best, Juliet and her boyfriend, possibly husband, Cy, suggest she come and stay with them until she feels better. Investigating further, we learn that Rose is sporting a lot of implants, and seemingly got them all installed at the Clean Cut Clinic, a place we rescue Lucy Thackeray from during the Hippocratic Oath gig. And it seems the Ripper who operated on her was none other than this piece of crap, Charles Bucks, whom we know from the last login gig is using scavenged, second-hand cyberware literally stolen off of dead bodies by the scavs in his basement. Now, there's of course the argument that too much cyberware is going to cause cyberpsychosis no matter who installed it, but this guy is clearly the type to throw all caution to the wind, all in the name of making more money. And we can see back on his computer that he did a whole lot of work on her. He's also extremely pushy on the automated reminder emails, sending Rose frequently more consistent ones through autumn 2076 up to the start of 2077 about upcoming appointments. Yeah, this whole thing's another reason to suggest that we take Charles out during last login in my book. Fortunately, Juliet and Cy have a little more sense about who's a good Ripperdoc, and instead ask the advice of one of the few people we can trust in this world, Victor Vector. And just like with us, he gives Juliet the hard-to-swallow truth. Rose has incurable cyberpsychosis, and it seems the only people who could possibly help her, so to speak, would be MaxTac. Victor warns that this should be done quickly for the safety of everyone around Rose, including Juliet. Sadly, Juliet does not take this advice on board. I guess she fears MaxTac may decide to simply put Rose down. So instead, Juliet and Cy continue to drain their bank accounts on a combination of lidocaine, a skin-numbing painkiller used by the animals in Maelstrom, as well as beta-haloperidol, presumably a modified version of haloperidol, which is an antipsychotic used to treat schizophrenia and other psychological illnesses. Sadly, as per Victor's advice, whilst these may temporarily improve the situation, they do not stave off the inevitable. Clara Horrigan, the mother of Juliet and Rose, receives 40 calls from Rose one night, only to overhear erratic breathing on the other end. Juliet, attempting to quell her mother's fears, ensures her the situation is under control, which it clearly isn't. Rose is first kept in the bedroom upstairs, it seems, but had to be confined to the basement eventually after clearly becoming too aggressive. After 71 days living with the couple, Rose broke Cy's arm in 2 places. At first, he lied and said it was a hit and run, but after several more weeks it seems, he eventually left for the Sunset Motel, leaving a note for Juliet to meet him there and claiming that Rose just couldn't be saved. Again, Juliet should have listened. Reading a private diary on Rose's laptop, we can get an even stronger insight into the deranged mind of this poor victim. For whatever reason, Rose had become fixated on going to the parade in Japantown, and quite why this event in particular is such an obsession for her is a little puzzling. All she can claim is that the Echo is telling her to see the parade, ending with quote-unquote, "the dam is already cracking." It makes me wonder if Arasaka could be using some sort of post-hypnotic suggestion to subtly encourage the populace to go and bear witness to their displays of power like the parade. And Rose, in her current condition, is merely having these implanted thoughts surface to the forefront of her conscious mind more so than they should. Or it could just be the deranged ramblings of a cyberpsycho. Either way, I'll bear this potential method of indoctrination in mind as a potential clue for future investigations. Now, on the ground floor of the house is a safe, no doubt containing the information Juliet stole from Zetatech, which, if you remember, is the reason Reyes sent us in here in the first place. Unfortunately, it's inaccessible without an access key, and the only place we haven't searched yet is the basement. You know, the place Juliet had to keep her cyberpsycho sister by the end. And we can even view this scene before heading down there via the security camera.
Juliet, why? Why would you do this to me? Friends can't keep me here, they said. Gotta leave. Has the parade started?
Clearly, Juliet's admirable, unwavering devotion to her sister has cost her her life, in the form of a knife right between the shoulder blades. Now, heading down here is definitely one of the scariest moments in the game, in my opinion, and taking out cyber psychos is rarely a walk in the park, though you can bypass the horrifying experience of this one if you successfully sneak up behind Rose and incapacitate her quickly. On her body, we can read a new level of derangement that she'd reached, going so far as to contact a neighbor telling him that Juliet and Cy are trying to poison her. And once you've reached that irreconcilable level of paranoia for those taking care of you, well, it's clear this wasn't going to end well for the couple. The terrified neighbor, of course, simply blocked Rose, but perhaps if he'd contacted MaxTac, things could have turned out differently. But alas, it's everybody for themselves in Night City. Canonically, I guess there's a bit of a moral conundrum here as to whether we lethally or non-lethally deal with Rose, and the only criticism I have of this gig is that I wish we could have called MaxTac or Regina like with the other psychos to see if anything can be done for Rose. As it stands, leaving her alive is downright dangerous for everybody on this street. Anyhow, with this horrible situation kind of dealt with, just grab the data from the safe and deposit it nearby. Reyes feels kind of bad, I guess, at not showing more of an interest in Juliet's personal problems, and wasn't even aware that she had a sister. By the way, there's an assault in progress over here where we can learn that 6th Street were also looking for Juliet. Sounds like in her line of work, she'd wound up killing a few of them. Of course, they weren't able to find her because she was likely already dead at this point. I just hope that in their continued search, Cy doesn't also wind up getting found by them. Though I did visit the Sunset Motel where he said he'd gone and there was no sign of him, sadly. Anyway, this small mystery horror tragedy gig is truly a little hidden gem of this game in my opinion, and it's a compelling story to get invested in for 15 minutes. So for this, I rate it, of course, an S tier gig. With that fairly heavy gig out of the way, the next one is thankfully a little lighter, but still does the cool thing of alluding to a wider narrative conspiracy. Ted Fox, a reporter for N54 News, has hired us to uncover some dirt on how corporations and gangs actually work together. In this instance, it's a case of Kendachi arms manufacturers working alongside 6th Street. Ted is hoping to bring this to light because he wants people to know the truth, especially when the truth creates drama.
You want a scandal?
I want the truth. Period. Especially if it's inconvenient.
It's a very small gig, this one, albeit with the caveat that we must remain undetected as an optional objective. Best way to do that then is to not try and break into the Kendachi factory through the front, but rather through the opening skylight in the roof. Shooting or hacking any cameras whose line of sight you may come into, then blanket disabling the lot on a terminal inside. In front of it is a shard on something called Project Arsenal, which seemingly involves 6th Street transporting goods on behalf of Kendachi. Whether that means stealing the munitions of competitors or shipping Kendachi's own munitions to certain individuals in an attempt to drive up market demand is unclear. What is clear is that Kendachi wants some of their supplies moved off the books, and by placing a tracker on one of the supply vans inside, Ted is hoping to find out what and where. He claims that getting the truth here will be a career maker for him, and again, we find ourselves as just one cog in a machine which is far bigger than us the player. Something I do really respect about this game is how there's a number of quests like these wherein it isn't obvious what happens next. We play our part and move on to something else, kinda like life. Of course, we can infer more info than is clear at a surface level. That's kind of the point of this whole series, to dive into the details, connect the dots, and see what the developers hid beneath the surface. What we keep finding is that events in this world are far bigger than just V. A couple more things we can learn on this gig is that the Kendachi guards are aware of Ted, having seen him taking pictures outside. And Kendachi, like most of the other companies in this world, seem pretty terrible to work for. In an email about the automatization of their factory, Kendachi claimed that any workers laid off by this have to return all company cyberware, paying for any damages caused, and also sign a non-compete agreement which will remain in place for 20 years. I.e., all laid off employees not only lose their job, but they can't go and work for a competitor or set up their own business in the same sector. Presumably, failing to follow this will result in some fairly deadly consequences. And I can see more and more why V opted for the life of a freelance merc, unshackled from the bounds of tyrannical megacorporations. Honestly, if we can help deliver a blow to these guys, then great. In fact, even working for them and holding on to your job isn't so great either. As taking out one of the guards, we can read that he's being forced to spend half his pay on some kind of cognitive booster in order to get through 3 double night shifts in a row and keep his job. Being told, quote unquote, that's just the way it is. Truly a dude trapped in the never-ending corpo rat race. Anywho, nice little gig which sheds a bit more insight on how unfair and dishonest the corpos are and explains why working for them is so terrible. It's not majorly fleshed out beyond that, but what is here is pretty short and sweet. A C+, in my opinion. Severance Package is the tale of what happens when you're living up a life of corpo luxury, only to ultimately realize your insignificance when the company you worked for screw you over without a care in the world by laying you off without so much as a severance package. Brianna Kumar was a lead engineer at Cytech, a cyberware manufacturing company, and now she's hoping that by retrieving the data files for the projects she was working on, she'll be able to launch back into her career with a competitor, or perhaps bribe Cytech to give her severance pay. That bit's unclear. Now, this factory is a pretty big place to make our way through, with a large, inaccessible assembly chamber right in the middle. However, if you come through via the back door of the factory, these stairs will take you right where you need to be. As usual though, I'd recommend looking around some for some insight into the fact that Cytech ain't exactly a great place to work for either. For instance, one employee's marriage appears to be on the verge of collapse, due to a policy which literally forces him to stay at his desk until the project he's working on is done, which is exactly what I've done with this video, come to think of it. In the front cabin out here are a couple emails on the restructuring of the company. In the first of these, they claim that they'll be providing severance packages to those they'd like to thank for their years of service. But for those who don't have that in their contracts, they are going to get screwed over. Then, in the second email, they straight up lay out to everyone the 4 individuals whom they're quote-unquote ending cooperation with, Brianna Kumar being amongst them. It's no wonder then that she's mad and has contacted a fixer. Though by the way, Reyes himself ain't exactly thrilled about this one, with a sarcastic text in the job description about how terrible it must be for this corpo to suddenly feel poor and hard done by. But in the end, she is paying, and that's what matters. Finally reaching Rihanna's personal computer then, we can get a little more info about the projects she was working on, and why the company let her go. Her deltoid musculoskeletal implant, it seems, was something she just couldn't agree with Cytech on. They wanted a cheaper, less cutting-edge model which could be marketed more widely, whilst Rihanna wanted to push the tech further, disregarding the need for things like neural safeguards and safety in general, of course, all in the name of innovation. It seems she then began working on a prototype of this dangerous sounding thing, and whilst not yet compatible with hardware outside of Cytech, she reckons with some changes to the drivers, that would no longer be an issue. So, just to get this straight, we've broken into Cytech to steal plans for a deltoid musculoskeletal implant, which could be harmful to a large handful of people if produced on a mass scale, for its creator to then likely get it manufactured at a competitor company, who'll then make a hell of a lot of money at the expense of God knows what percentage of the consumer base. Yeah, this gig basically forces us to potentially participate in evil, and I think it's a great reflection again of the morally grey nature of this world. We're too busy trying to survive each day and earn a few ennies to stop and consider the morality of each decision we make. So in this instance, Rihanna gets her severance pay, and the immediate people involved in this gig, i.e. us, Rihanna and Reyes, are happy. Overall, I'd call this another C tier. It's one which highlights the evil of a tyrannical corporation, and the large factory provides something of a challenge, but again, not quite on the same level of innovation as many of the higher tier gigs. So, you know how historically, mental asylums have been a place to lock troublesome people away from society and pretty much always result in making patients worse rather than better? Yeah, well in 2077, that form of mental asylum is still very much alive and kicking. For this one, our job is to rescue an NCPD sergeant, Jasmine Dixon, who was unwillingly incarcerated in this place after overhearing something she shouldn't at the precinct. Fortunately, it seems Jasmine has a loving husband who very much would like to see his wife returned home safely, and is willing to pay Reyes handsomely for our services. Additionally, having an NCPD officer on side is, in Muammar's eyes, a good way to be owed a favour, though I fail to see how Jasmine is going to just freely waltz back into the NCPD after this, even if we do break her out. You'll see, as we investigate this place, that it is awful. Truly one of the most abhorrent practices in the entirety of Night City, in my opinion. Heading into the reception and trying to book an appointment, we're told this.
I'm afraid that won't be possible. Contact with the outside world can impede our highly specialized treatment.
Okay, how about over the hall?
I'm afraid our head doctor wouldn't permit it.
Highly specialized treatment. Yeah, sure thing, love. Let's sneak our way in then and see what this highly specialized treatment is all about. Now, there's a couple doors you can sneak through out of sight in here, and the one behind reception will have a shard that points you directly to where Jasmine is being held. Keeping it quiet down this corridor then, we can see how none of these patients seem in great shape, and are all clearly being beaten by the guards. One in the bathroom is even dead, and then we've got this dude.
Oh, would you look at that? We were in the same unit, him and me.
You recognize him?
from his ink. That and being scared shitless. The hell we went through in Mexico. The things we saw. What we did. No quicker way to lose your mind.
It's too bad for this guy, and worse still that we can't also break him out. Not that it would necessarily do much good. Still, random unexpected character building for Johnny is always welcome. In a back office sits a terminal with 2 more pieces of info on how bad this asylum is. Firstly, we have Woody Geldbaum emailing about visiting his father Bob, and it's clear that this place just doesn't admit visitors full stop, claiming isolation is essential to patient treatment, and in Woody's case they don't even have the decency to refer to his father by name, but rather just by the patient number. In reality, all this is clearly a ruse to no doubt A, not have family bear witness to the awful mistreatment of these patients, and B, be able to dispose of the patients for whatever reasons, and still operate under the guise that they're alive. The second email is even worse, coming directly from Biotechnica, a company whose shady practices we already know a hell of a lot about, thanks to all that stuff with Joanne Koch in the previous video. This time they're wanting to test their new drug, Cyzalon, and are particularly interested in procuring pregnant women. Now, this may in fact lead to a Mad Max Fury Road reference as well, where one Charlize Fury is attempting to smuggle pregnant women out of Biotechnica's farms. But I digress. This email gets disturbing when they start to claim that they're wanting to test the frequency of miscarriages, and have clearly gone to this asylum since they can disregard the welfare of whatever poor people they get. Dr. Jacob Shipman then gets back, claiming to have 1 pregnant patient, but that the number can be increased to 3 in the near future, i.e. he can forcefully impregnate the other female patients and sell them off to Biotechnica. No doubt one of the extra 2 mentioned would be Jasmine herself, but fortunately that's not going to happen. Before we get to her though, there's actually another reference to Dr. John Shipman out in the world, up in Arroyo regarding the capture of an escaped patient. Shipman sends some mercs to round the guy up, and when they can't detect him amidst a homeless camp, he orders the entire camp to be taken out, so that the patient can be ID'd in the hospital. Clearly he's not afraid of patients getting hurt, but rather escapees being able to tell the world about the terrible conditions they're trapped under. Come to Jasmine's room and take out this creepy guard, and we can break her out with the key on his body. Take a little look in the other rooms up here though, and we can see just how bad things are for people in here. And now, speaking to Jasmine, whom we know was of perfectly sound mind before being sent in here, it's clear that a brief stint in this place has already weighed heavily on her mind, and who knows if she'll ever fully recover.
Everything will be all right. You're getting out of here, okay?
Yeah, I understand. We can go.
Those eyes have seen some shit, you can tell, and we can take the caring approach here or the cold shoulder one. Either way, Jasmine will be incredibly grateful before being taken back to her loving husband. I merely hope that the NCPD don't try and come for her again. After all, she's been through enough, but would have been through even worse if we hadn't showed up.
You don't know what they... How many times they... Every day...
I don't think I've been fully angry towards the enemies of a gig like this since Dirty Biz, and hopefully, if Jasmine recovers, she'll somehow work towards getting this place torn to the ground. For now, all we can do is go marching through security like a berserker tank, and rank this one a solid S tier for the brilliantly disturbing world building contained within. This next one comes right off of the underlying storyline taking place within 6th Street during the game. So, if you didn't already know, 6th Street around the start of the game recently underwent something of a coup, wherein the previous leader, Morton, was taken out and usurped by their new leader, Will Gunner. He's mentioned during a lot of the 6th Street encounters. The Stadium Love shooting contest is a party thrown in his honor, and there's certain Morton loyalists found in the game who Gunner also took out shortly after staging his coup. Pablo Silva, for example, can be found over here. He was planning to leave Night City after the coup and had already sent his wife and kids on ahead. But in an attempt to clear something up with the NCPD on his way out, Silva was waylaid by 6th Street and tragically taken out. Another guy, a Morton loyalist who needs to flee, is Flavio dos Santos, and he'll be the focus of this gig. His plan though was a little more calm and collected, contacting Reyes to arrange him a nomad escort out of the city. Our job is to simply get him from his safe house down the road to said nomad escort. Sounds super easy, right? Wrong. Flavio, in his infinite wisdom, decided that before his final departure from Night City, he'd throw a massive party at his safe house, hiring a ton of Joy Toys and a few friends. The idiot didn't think that a huge number of hired workers converging on his location would draw any attention. And of course, when we arrive, the majority of them are dead, with 6th Street having gone in and lit up the place. And taking 6th Street out, we get yet more insight into the more destructive side of Johnny's mindset.
Look, shot him in the back while they were running. Too bad God's dead. I mean Old Testament God. One who'd fire and brimstone the whole fucking bunch.
Yeah, I get that these guys are shitbags, and it's enough to make anyone mad, but Johnny's anarchist, rain down hellfire, nuke the city attitude is really showing more strongly during the Santo Domingo gigs. And it kinda makes me worry about what he'll do with our body once the credits roll in the Temperance ending. Anyway, Flavio, who probably out of everyone here deserves to survive the least after getting the rest killed, is miraculously still alive, which in this instance actually works out pretty well for us. But he's not in a perfect condition, and having sustained a bullet wound needs to get out of here quick. So, taking him in the Archer Heller from the garage, the Nomad escort is fortunately remarkably close, and we can leave Flavio safely in his hands because it seems this guy's got a lot to lose.
Shit! If he dies, I don't get paid!
Well mate, too bad that you took on a job to help a total idiot gonk. But by the looks of it, with a little attention from a Ripper, the guy is gonna pull through. And at the end of the day, everybody gets paid, which from a gameplay perspective is really V's main incentive to do these gigs. It's cool to have a gig dedicated to the 6th Street coup which underpins the goings on of Santo Domingo, though I think it's even cooler still to be able to find others like Pablo Silva who were also in this situation. Just the gig itself then is pretty good. I'd say Johnny interactions do always bump these up in quality, and therefore I award this one a B+. For My Son is a gig that I've been finding references to throughout Night City in the other videos, and now, finally, we're getting to the thing itself. To summarize, this one is set down in Arroyo's animal boxing ring, and despite being a Santo Domingo gig, this one's actually labelled in the journal as another Pacifica one. And quite why they decided to move it into this district, I'm not entirely sure, but perhaps it has something to do with the planned updates to map geography in Phantom Liberty or something. Anyway, Monica Steiner, mother of Lenny Steiner, has hired us to avenge the death of her sweet baby boy. Lenny, you see, thought it would be a good idea to go toe-to-toe in the ring with all-time fighting champion and deadly animal Logan Garcia. In this scenario, Logan was essentially Ivan Drago, whilst Lenny was Apollo Creed. But since this kid wasn't our long-time adversary turned friend, we're not going to spend weeks training in the foothills of Soviet Russia and then defeat Logan in a revenge match. Though thinking about it, that would have been really cool. Instead, we're gonna do what we do on every merc job by marching in, taking the guy out, and sneakily carrying him to a fixer's car to await due justice. Thing is, if you haven't completed Beat on the Brat here yet, you can actually kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Defeat Rhino in the ring first, then when nobody suspects a thing, sneak up to the office and take out Garcia. Bear in mind, you probably want to do this one more stealthily than usual, as aggroing the place and being forced to fight everyone may result in having to kill the weapon vendor, somebody you absolutely want to keep alive, especially if you use melee weapons, as he sells the legendary crafting specs for many of them. So, taking out Logan, we can read a shard on his body from Monica requesting why nobody called an ambulance for her son. Logan insensitively spelled out that it was because Lenny was dead, at which point I think Monica decided to contact Reyes. We can also see that other members of the animals find Logan's aggression problematic, and the fact that he keeps taking out his own gang members makes it kinda difficult to find new people to join. Not that it's impossible, as people like Jack Gorky from back in the Hot Merchandise gig was still itching for a fight with Logan, who does, in fairness, issue a warning that if they lose, they're probably gonna die. With Logan now gone though, that's not really gonna be a problem anymore. But we know from previous videos, the story doesn't end here. Sadly, the animals caught on that it was Monica who ordered the hits, and then they took her out in revenge. Monica was planning on escaping Night City forever at the time with a runner named Nina Chilo, but the animals got to her first. Only annoying thing about this assault in progress encounter though, is that it can be discovered well before we do the gig. So hopefully they patch it at some point to only be a respawning encounter after completing that gig, like they do with several of the other bodies. Even still, it's a really cool detail, and I love how they continue this story afterwards. Sometimes it seems all too easy in Night City to simply hire a fixer, if you have the eddies, and make all your problems go away. But in this instance, it's clear that it's not quite that simple. There are repercussions, and in exacting her revenge, Monica paid the ultimate price. And so, the chain of revenge continued until one side had been completely eliminated. Nice gig, cool setting like with many of these, and the further consequences afterwards are a really cool touch. Though it would have been nice to have a chat with Logan Garcia maybe, as we do with many targets, to get their side of the story. Hell, I kinda hoped he'd come out to speak to us after we defeated Rhino, since, you know, nobody else has apparently ever done that. So, whilst the connections are cool, I think the gig itself is gonna have to be just a B-. The last of Reyes' gigs now, but not the last in Santo Domingo. Desperate Measures was added to the game back in 1.6, and if you ask me, it's definitely one of the best, most unique little gigs not just in Santo Domingo, but possibly the whole game. I found that just like with Concrete Cage Trap, which was also a 1.6 gig, these ones just go to a lot more effort to actually set up the character that you're working with for the gig. Oftentimes you never even meet the person who commissioned you, which whilst potentially realistic, doesn't necessarily give the gig the same stakes as a person whom you get to talk to and whose motivations you understand. So, we'll meet Pedro Aymar, an employee of Zetatech at the start of this gig, and the first thing you'll notice about him is that he's a major cosplayer for the movie Coraline. Second thing you'll notice is that he's clearly very nervous about this whole thing.
You're shaking like a loose exhaust pipe. Maybe this ain't the job for you.
No, I've got it all planned out already.
His plan then is to collect a Zetatech convoy and sell the contents on for money. He's pretty cagey at first as to why exactly he needs the eddies, but pressing him a bit, we can learn the truth.
Spit it out, Pedro. I don't like unknowns.
I have ALS.
ALS, what's that? Doesn't sound so good.
3 months ago, I was still walking. 3 months from now, I'll trade my chair for a bed. I won't be able to lift a finger, utter a word, not even take a shit without help. I figure I got nothing to lose. Why not take a chance, right?
So, in order to not become a Stephen Hawking meets Coraline cosplayer, Pedro needs to undergo a full body conversion. Now, we know in Cyberpunk that such a feat is technically possible. I mean, it's kind of what Johnny is slowly doing to us. But I think in this case, it simply means he'd be getting a full Borg body with his brain left intact. Though, if you ask me, I'd say there's a high chance the poor guy's probably getting scammed. He's arranged to have it done at the Soviet Union, where apparently the practice is pretty commonplace.
I read that it's become a pretty standard procedure over there. The area's heavy industry, harsh conditions. Normal human bodies don't last long.
Now, aside from this potentially opening up a whole avenue for V's survival, which, I mean, let's just wait and see if Phantom Liberty touches on this topic again before discussing that further, let's just check the laptop in Pedro's bedroom and we can actually read the convo between him and this Boris Fedorov fella. See, Pedro already paid his life savings to Boris, for which Boris then claimed that was actually only a first payment. Of course, he didn't tell Pedro that up front, and now Pedro is in too deep to back out. Either this guy's a total scam artist and has Pedro hook, line and sinker, or there is a small off chance he's going to legitimately attempt this surgery. If we try to entertain with Pedro the idea that he's being scammed, he just doesn't want to hear it, too desperate to listen to any doubts. What's more, he's even increased his electricity bill with the amount of tech he's gathered for this op, which is an extra little detail. So we head out and wait inside a restaurant for a Zetatech convoy to roll by, at which point Pedro initiates a roadblock protocol. We board the vehicle and grant Pedro remote access, but we're not out of the woods immediately. Another thing that's fun about this gig is it's one of the rare instances of base game vehicle combat, and I'm actually curious to see if this segment evolves at all after Phantom Liberty with proper vehicle combat, so I'll replay it after that. I used the Yinglong SMG for this one, and it was a spectacular display. In fact, I'd recommend smart guns all round for vehicle combat segments in this iteration of the game. Finally, we escape the tail of Zetatech convoys and drive the final stretch to Tyre Empire after Pedro gets distracted having to fight off a netrunner. The guy is over the moon, and with that, we wish him the best of luck with his body conversion. Though, if you ask me, his plan's kind of a long shot, hinging on it not being a scam, then successfully evading Zetatech on the trip to the Soviet Union, the op actually going well, and even with all of that working, he's then got to again escape from the Soviet Union and get back to the US. It'd be nice to find out, maybe in a future title, if this was indeed successful, but for now, this is where we part ways. Not just with Pedro, but with Reyes too, since this was Reyes' his final gig. He tells us he's hanging up the whole fixer thing, and as a parting gift, leaves us with Bloody Maria, a gored-up version of the tactician's shotgun. Of course, we know this isn't the last we're gonna see of Reyes, and I'm now gonna guess the retired fixer thing is gonna get completely retconned for Phantom Liberty, wherein he's also gonna be our go-to guy for acquiring all of the cars. This last gig of his, for now then, is, as far as I'm concerned, an A+. Not heavily connected to the rest of the game with random encounters per se, but a strong entry in and of itself. The Union Strikes Back is sadly not a gig which follows point for point the plot of The Empire Strikes Back, but it's a pretty fun one nonetheless, showing a more charitable, selfless side to Rogue. You see, in 2077, workers' unions have been fully decommissioned, meaning there's no legal protection for workers who decide to strike, and no capabilities for employees to protest the ludicrously awful conditions which they're subjected to. The Corps run things how they want, and their employees can either trade their entire life just to put food on the table, or just not put food on the table. But of course, there's nothing to physically stop workers from saying they've had enough and still striking. That's still going to cause disruption to whatever company they're working for and set back production. And that's where Vic Vega comes in. No, not that Vic Vega, and nor that Vincent Vega. No, as off the rails as these guys can sometimes be, Cyberpunk's Vic Vega appears to be far more dislikable. Now, normally for gigs like this, we have the option to choose between straight up taking them out or loading them to a fixer's car. And in this instance, it's the same. But what the objective markers don't tell you is that Rogue will not be happy unless Vega is delivered to the fixer's car alive, and that nobody else is killed in the process. It is an extremely specific set of objectives to win her full approval here, especially given how heavily guarded the place is. Now, you can head in through the front door, though there is no way to make this receptionist budge or reveal any information. We can, however, distract her with the TV behind and swipe this access card. But then we're simply faced with more downstairs guards to sneak past, and quickly this becomes kinda difficult. Instead, I'd recommend climbing to the roof and coming in through this back window. You still might have to take out a few upstairs guards non-lethally, but it's much more straightforward this way. As always, there's plenty of terminal entries to read for a little more context on the situation here. Vic's team, known as C-Team, have hired this building and demanded full discretion from the staff. That explains the receptionist's caginess. What's more, Vic's way of splitting up the distribution of their bonus pay just shows exactly where his priorities lie, with 50% of the bonus being provided to those who took part in quote Black Ops work. It sounds as though Vic is awarding employees who did things which are less than legal, and out in the world we can find a prime example of what this looks like. In this assault in progress up here, we can find what members of Vega's team do to workers who put up a fight. These guys thought they could stand up to him by hiring their own hustle to fight back, whilst Vega himself simply ordered his men to shoot everyone through their faceplates. Nice guy. Another example then exists over in Charter Hill, where the boss of this warehouse used some legal loopholes to allow Militech to open fire on his striking workforce. This one isn't tied directly to Vega, of course, but I think paints the picture a little more as to the atrocities which can be gotten away with in this world. Making our way to Vega's office then, provided we're stealthy, we can simply sneak up behind and incapacitate him. Then, the most simple way to get him to the fixer's car appears to be out of this window here. But in doing that, this happens.
Hey, I already sent the car. You were supposed to knock Vega out, toss him in the trunk. I know this gobsucker deserved to die, but... well, at least there wasn't any collateral damage.
So, it appears we'll once again have to sneak past Vega's personnel, only this time carrying him as well. Make sure to check his personal computer before you leave though, if you want to learn a little more about his clientele. He's been asked to burn garages for stalling on payments, cover up murders, and take out ringleaders of workforces who are planning to strike. Vega truly is an enemy of, well, anyone with a job working for somebody else. And it's noble of Rogue to have this guy taken down and brought to justice for free. Makes me more reluctant, in fact, to choose the ending where she, because keeping her around is clearly good for the everyday person of Night City. So, with him successfully carried downstairs and any remaining guards snuck past, I'd recommend carrying him out the back door, as the van is situated pretty much outside. Chuck him in the back, and Rogue will finally call us impressed.
Vega's taken a little nap in the trunk. No sieves hit. Yep. Knew you were the right one for the job.
As opposed to this, if we kill him and his personnel.
Do the words "for the public good" mean anything to you, V? Because what you pulled back there, that shit was the opposite of good. Those people have suffered enough. Christ. But at least Vega's fucking dead.
Yeah, they really make the outcome matter for this gig despite not telling you in the optional objectives. And so, this little gig, which is equal parts a Star Wars, Reservoir Dogs, and Pulp Fiction reference, gets awarded, in my opinion, a pretty good A-, fleshing out the world's subtext like many other gigs, though not having much in the ways of story interactions during the gig itself. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the final gig of this series, after which I'll have pieced together, to the best of my ability, the hidden secrets and details of every gig in the game pre-Phantom Liberty. I can't wait to pick this series up again in September once the DLC drops, and in the meantime I've got cyber psychos and some less obvious encounters to cover, unsolved mysteries and whatnot. For now though, let's explore the final gig of Santo Domingo and the third of the DLC gigs, called Nasty Hangover. This one begins outside a warehouse in Arroyo, where we learn that Rogue has been commissioned by a corpo to recover his lost data chip. You see, Carl Gidsky recently went on one hell of a mental bender and wound up stumbling drunk through the streets of 6th Street's turf. The part of this that makes him an utter gonk is that he did so sporting some top-grade corporate data shard of Kang Tao's, which popped right out of his head when 6th Street kicked it in. Lucky for him, trauma showed up before the guy got fully flatlined, but the problem remained as to 6th Street now having a shard of Kang Tao's secrets. Secrets that we need to recover before they're cracked. First part of this gig then is pretty straightforward, like most. Simply shoot our way through the 6th Streeters, make our way upstairs, and collect back the shard. Up there, we can read the full incident report, written up by 6th Street on their encounter with Carl. It's pretty much the scenario I just described. Behind is a file discussing transportation of goods from the warehouse. Seems like it's not just this top secret data shard that 6th Street are storing here. I guess this is kind of a safe house of theirs for illegal tech they procure. With the shard collect, more 6th Streeters will rock up, and taking out them, we can call Carl and go return his shards down the road. But just as we're about to have everything settled, this happens.
Fuck!
What is it?
Damn it! We were this fucking close! No! Fuck! Please! No!
How do you do, Carl?
Now, we have two choices here. We can let events unfold, Carl will die, and Kang Tao, purely for their own amusement, will offer us a cred chip. And honestly, accepting this thing kinda makes you feel like a little bitch. Even Johnny's disappointed.
That's it. Atta girl. Bitches always get down on their knees.
Equally, letting Carl die and then trying to stick it to the corpse still feels like a pretty hollow action.
Fuck you and your corpo dealings.
And still it speaks. Shame its message isn't getting across.
Go fuck yourselves.
On the other hand though, successfully dispatching these 4 members of Kang Tao and then the 2 that follow truly makes you feel like a terrifying demon of Night City, and is especially fitting since this gig is only unlocked at a very high late game level.
You fucking killed them!
So to speak. Best if you'd hand over the eddies and duck the fuck out.
Here!
I mean, we just saved the guy's life so well that we put the fear of God into him. And man, even Rogue is impressed. Got to admit, dealing with that situation in that way felt pretty satisfying. And Carl even texts us shortly after to say thank you, realizing he really is only breathing now because of us. Overall, I'd say it's probably the weakest of the 3 DLC gigs, but is by no means weak. For that badass ending alone then, I think I'm gonna have to name the final gig of this series an A tier. And there we have my completed tier list for every gig as of 1.63 in Cyberpunk 2077. I've really enjoyed making this series, and I hope I've shone a good light on the intricacies and interconnectedness of this part of the game. It's really clear to me from doing this just how much effort the devs actually put in to even the smallest of story threads in 2077. And this series isn't even the full picture. There's a ton more stuff that I've discovered through making this that hasn't fit into these videos, which I'll be exploring in the future. There's also things though that I'm sure I haven't discovered, so comment below any bizarre unresolved mysteries you know of, and I'll add them to the list. And of course, we have 1.7 and Phantom Liberty to look forward to, which I'm sure will add a ton more story and lore to look into. But for now, if you enjoyed this video and you haven't already, do check out the other entries to this series for more insights into the hidden secrets and tiny details relating to 2077's gigs. And if you're planning on buying Phantom Liberty at any point in the future, or anything off the GOG store for that matter, they're currently running a summer sale, and if you buy anything through my link, you'll also be supporting supporting this channel, just like all my amazing patrons whose names are on screen now. In fact, next month, I'm really going to aim to set up a Discord server for everyone to hang out on, with integrated Patreon rankings included. It's something I've wanted to do for a while, but I have zero experience managing Discord servers, so it's proving a bit of a learning curve, but I will do my best to get that up and running as soon as I can. Thank you again very much for watching. I'm Bram, and I'll see you soon in another video.